Alright, hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am just another heavy metal maniac, and today I have another video for you guys, and it's all about bands that jumped the shark for me. Alright, well tonight we are listening to Corrosion and Conformity, In the Arms of God. This is, I think, one of the best Corrosion and Conformity albums, one of my favorite bands, and yeah, this is a pretty killer album. Listening to it on the brand new CD player that you cannot see because it is off camera. And yeah, really like new CD player, sounds awesome, and oh, slide a bit. And yeah, killer album. So anyways, the topic of this video, as I said, 10 bands, I've listed 10 bands that jumped the shark for me. Now, at a certain point in each of these bands' respective careers, I am a fan, you know. But at a certain point, each of these bands, they either just go in a direction that I really don't care for, or they, in some cases, I think just took a hard left turn into just bad, sucky albums. And yeah, we're gonna, oh, I'm so sorry about that. Anyways, and we're gonna talk about that. So first, the first band I have on my list is the most recent band to jump the shark for me, and that is none other than Ministry. Now, I do really enjoy this band's early material. I think Ministry put out some of the best, like, industrial metal of all time, especially The Mind Is a Terrible Thing to Taste and Psalm 69. Still two of my favorite albums to this day. I think those albums are just both incredible, just awesome albums. I think Filth Pig is underrated and overlooked. I think that's a great album. Some of the albums back in the, the 80s and the 90s are hit and miss, sure. But then you have the, the W trilogy, like the Rio Grande Blood and The Last Sucker. Those are killer albums. I really, really dig those albums a lot. But after The Last Sucker, they put out the album Relapse, if I'm remembering correctly. And that album just wasn't very good. The album that came out after that wasn't very good either. And then they put out Americant in 2018, which to me is just the absolute low point of their career. It's just kind of a cringy, just boring mess of basically Al Jurgensen ranting for however long that album is about how much he doesn't like Donald Trump. And I don't have a problem with that, right? I don't have a problem with artists putting political messages in their songs by any means, but if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it well. And Al really shit the bed on that one, I think. Then lockdown hit, and then they said they were working on an album during quarantine, and they put out Moral Hygiene in 2021. And that album sounded like a quarantine album, not in a good way, but I don't know, it was a step up from American, but just, again, was not good in my opinion. Then 2024, they put out their most recent album, Hopium for the Masses, and this is the point where I jump off the Ministry train, because it felt like a continuation of Moral Hygiene. Again, it's a step up from Americans, but it's just, again, not a good album in my opinion. It's boring, it sounds uninspired, it sounds like Al just put a record together just to put a record together. And yeah, at that point, I'm off the Ministry train, to be honest. There is damn near nothing about, because, yeah, I'm off, like I said, I'm off the Ministry train at this point, because if Al is going to keep putting out, just lackluster, subpar albums like Moral Hygiene or Hopium for the Masses, I have no interest, At least we have all those, great albums back in the, at least we can all listen to Psalm 69 still, right? At least we have all those early great albums to return to. But for now, I'm off the Ministry train, and I don't see myself going back anytime soon if Al's going to keep putting out albums like this. Alright, now this is the next band that jumped the shark for me. Alright, now just to clarify, a lot of these bands kind of jumped the shark for me before I was, like, even alive, but the trend is very much the same. I was a fan of this band at a certain point in their career, and they just went in a direction I didn't like. And in the next band on this list, it's one, if it wasn't for Metallica taking the #1 spot, I would argue that this is, like, probably the biggest metal band in the world currently. That band is Slipknot. Now, I still really, really love this band's first two albums. I think the Self-Titled and Iowa are awesome albums. They're not just good by, by like new metal standards or whatever. They're great albums just on their own. They're very aggressive and hostile, and they're just super pissed off and angry. The great drum work. It's got great riffs. Corey, I think, sounds phenomenal on both of those albums. Are some of the lyrics like pretty dumb? Yeah. Are some of the lyrics very juvenile and like kind of come across as adolescent whining at points? Yeah. But that's kind of one of the new metal tropes, really. But otherwise, I think Slipknot and Iowa are two awesome albums. But with Iowa came a bunch of success. Like, if I remember correctly, Iowa hit number 3 or number 2 on the Billboard 200. Massively charting album, huge success for the band. And then at a certain point, they streamlined their sound. They got more poppy. They got more commercial. And, they put out songs like Duality and Before I Forget and, Vermilion, Circle. They started doing more of the poppy ballad type thing. And, throwing in songs that have kind of big, rock hooks. And, they toned down the aggression from an 11 to about a 6 or a 5. And just to clarify, I'm not dogging on you if you like that style at all. If you like, the later Slipknot, or if you just like that style in general, that's totally cool. Alright, no judgment here. But for me personally, it's not a style I care for really at all. And again, to me, it's a step down coming off the first 2 albums, which are just pure hostility and aggression, right? And this continued with All Hope Is Gone, kind of the same thing, very just kind of big choruses, big rock hooks, poppy ballads. I do like some of these songs off All Hope Is Gone and Volume 3, but overall, they're not albums I return to very often, if ever. But then, after All Hope Is Gone, obviously, Paul Gray, the bass player, unfortunately passed away, and he was, like, one of the band's primary songwriters. And the other band's primary songwriter, Joey Jordison, was fired. So they fired Joey Jordison, who, aside from being a fuck of a drummer, was also one of their primary songwriters. So both of their primary songwriters are gone, and to me, the quality just went down even further for Slipknot. The Gray Chapter, there's like a couple songs on it that are passable, but for the most part, it's just to me, it's just cringy, and none of the songs are good at all. We Are Not Your Kind is just the most boring album. There's not a single song on there I remember, other than like the big Unsainted, which was the big lead single. That song's fine. And so far, again, I don't remember a single song off that album. It's just boring. And I still love the Slipknot's first 2 albums. Still love their first 2 albums a lot, actually. But, and there's a couple songs here and there from Volume 3 and All Hope Is Gone that I can get into, but for the most part, I'm off the Slipknot train, especially with all their, all their recent controversies, like them firing Jay Weinberg and stuff, and them practically being more of a corporation nowadays than an actual band. I've heard a bunch of people, I've seen a bunch of people online refer to Slipknot as, like, the Kiss of metal, and I feel like that's just sadly accurate. So yeah, Slipknot, I'm off the Slipknot train. Alright, number 3 is another absolutely big metal band, kind of the pioneers of new metal. Obviously, I'm talking about Korn. This is kind of the same case with Slipknot in a way. I still really like the first 2 Korn albums, the self-titled and then Life is Peachy. I think are pretty great albums. Again, not good just by, new metal standards. They're just great albums on their own. They're, I like the production. They're kind of raw. It's gritty. It's just dirty and filthy sounding. And Jonathan Davis, just some of those just like raw and emotional performances, on like a 90s metal album. It's just, those albums are really good. Again, some of the lyrics are pretty dumb, pretty just, juvenile. Jonathan Davis, in my opinion, was never the greatest lyric writer, but it fits totally with the early vibes on those albums. Just kind of nightmarish and creepy and just like dirty, dingy, dark. And tons of great songs on both of those albums. And yeah, I still really like the band's first 2 albums. But then they came out with Follow the Leader, and to me that's when the shift started. The production, to me the big shift was in the production. It got a lot cleaner and like less dirty. It feels like they were pushing, again, kind of like Slipknot, it feels like they were pushing for more of just like an accessible sound. Again, they kind of toned down the aggression, they toned down the darker elements. They brought on, Fred Durst to do a song. They brought on Ice Cube to do a song. And then they just kind of continued along with all the other albums. They put out Issues, which I really like the song Falling Away From Me, and maybe a couple other songs off of Issues, but that's really it. Untouchables, I don't like a single song off Untouchables, and then Take a Look in the Mirror, it's, again, don't like any of those songs off that album. And, yeah, that's kind of the way they've been going for a while. To me, they've just been putting out albums. It's not even necessarily that they're bad, it's just they're really in a style that I just don't like at all. Just kind of, you know, kind of poppy at points, kind of just, you know, I missed like the dirt and the grit. I missed the very, you know, I missed the darkness that was in the band sound. I missed the heaviness. And, you know, props to them. They have their fans. And, yep, they've had some ups and downs over the career for sure, like totality, but you know, they have their fan base, and if you still love Korn to this day, hey, more power to you, man. But now I still love the band's first two albums, but I will probably never listen to any new stuff Korn puts out. All right, this next band, this is the last new metal band of the day. It's kind of exactly the same situation. My number 4 pick is Static X. Again, pretty much exactly the same situation. I love the band's first two albums still, Wisconsin Death Trip and Machine. I think those are just, again, awesome albums. Like the song Bled for Days is still one of my all-time favorite songs, probably. And yeah, I love a bunch of the songs. I love Wisconsin Death Trip and Machine. I think they're just awesome, fucking kick-ass albums. But then they put out, what's it called after Machine? Shadow Zone? Yeah, I'm really not a fan of that album at all. There's a couple songs on there that are good again, but overall it's just not something I get into. Same thing happens again. They just, you know, they just put out albums that I really just kind of don't really care for at all. There's like some songs in here that are good, but as in terms of like a whole album's worth of material, I just don't get into it anymore. I used to be kind of into it. You know, I was really into Static X and Slipknot. Like, those were my two favorite bands at one point before I, you know, discovered anything that was, like, really heavy. You know, before I got really into thrash or death metal. And, but yeah, I can't return to any of their newer stuff. And I think the new Static X lineup, I think what they're doing is just absolutely disgusting and scummy. Pretty much just capitalizing off of Wayne Static's death and exploiting like his likeness and his legacy to you know, get money to, you know, sell concert tickets and stuff. It's really just gross and deplorable in my opinion. And yeah, rest in peace Wayne Static, obviously. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Static X, I will give him props. I think he was a very unique, awesome vocalist. I think he had a very iconic look, obviously, and I think he was a great frontman. But yeah, the new Static X lineup where they're just like basically parading his corpse around the streets asking for money. It's gross. It's just really gross. So yeah, that's my 4th pick, Static X. Alright, that's all the new metal bands out of the way. Let's talk about another band that I know jumps the shark for a lot of metalheads out there. A lot of metalheads out there. I'm certainly not going to be alone in my disdain for this band's later material. That band is none other than In Flames. The first 5 In Flames albums, I mean, it's just stellar, fucking top of the line stuff. Incredible material. You know, you think about Clayman, Jester Race, Colony, Horrible. Again, the first 5 albums, plus the Subterranean EP, it's just killer, absolutely killer stuff, you know. These guys were an institution of Swedish melodic death metal. They kind of, them and At the Gates really embodied, you know, the Gothenburg sound, and I think they were phenomenal. On the Clayman, you could argue they kind of went for a little bit more of a mainstreamy sound, a little bit more, they kind of maybe started embracing a little bit more of like the metalcore thing that was slowly starting to take off, but I don't care. I love Clayman. I think every song on that album is fantastic. But I think everyone knows the story of In Flames. It's a tale as old as time. They get big and they change their sound. So they put out Reroute to Remain, which it's not the worst thing ever. It's definitely them trying to be more accessible with their sound, kind of embracing more of the metalcore, alt metal that was really popular back in the early 2000s. But really, it's the mix that kills that album for me. That, you know, the guitar tone is just mud, and the drums are just super weak and thin in the mix. So I don't like Reroute to Remain at all. But it still was kind of mellow-deaf in parts. But then they put out Soundtrack to Your Escape and Come Clarity, and then they just, you know, started getting even further away, you know, from their sound. And then by the time you get to like A Sense of Purpose, and like you've got Siren Charms, Battles, those albums are just flat out terrible in my opinion. There is not a single redeemable quality about Siren Charms or Battles. Those are just terrible albums in my opinion. I know a lot of people really liked their new album Forgone. A lot of people were praising it as like, you know, their big comeback. A lot of people said it was one of their favorite albums of 2023. Good for them. I don't know. That album was fine. It had a couple like decent songs on it, but to me, they've very much, you know, found their niche. They're fine being like an arena rock type band, doing, you know, like the alt metal ballads and stuff. And I don't know, if you're into that stuff, again, it's fine. I know a lot of people love later In Flames stuff. I know a lot of people especially love, you know, Reroute to Remain and Come Clarity. I know a lot of people love those albums in particular. I don't. Those are just albums I don't get into at all. I really don't like them. And yeah, that's In Flames. I know, again, that's going to be on a lot of people's lists. A lot of people don't like the direction In Flames went in. Alright, let's talk about another Swedish melodic death metal band, Arch Enemy. I think I talked about Arch Enemy briefly on this channel before. I think I brought up their first album, Black Earth, in my underrated metal albums video, because I think the early stuff with Johan on the vocals is very underrated. To me, what kind of made Arch Enemy cool was it was still very raw, very ugly, and very heavy, but you know, the way they melded these beautiful, you know, haunting, like almost hopeful melodies in with that, you know, very dark and very ugly material. To me, that's what made Arch Enemy so cool and such a, you know, an awesome listen. So yeah, I really enjoy the first 3 albums with Johan on the vocals, and even though the vocals were arguably at their worst, like I think Johan is a good vocalist, but I think he's definitely the least, like, or the worst vocalist Arch Enemy has had. But I think they were musically at their best, for sure. Wages of Sin with Angela Gossow on the vocals was great. I really like Wages of Sin. I think that's a great album, because to me it feels like a continuation of their earlier sound, just with you know, Angela on the vocals this time. But Wages of Sin, in my opinion, was really the last good Arch Enemy album, because after that they put out Anthems of Rebellion and what's it called? Doomsday Machine. And I've tried to get into those 2 albums in particular, but I just can't. To me, they kind of got rid of like what made them special to an extent. And I don't know, I just find those albums to be very just kind of bland, very just kind of vanilla, almost like Baby's first melodic death metal. Again, if you like that stuff, you know, don't let me sit here and judge you. I'm an asshole on the internet, you know, who cares what I think. But yeah, I just don't like those albums, and over time they've just gotten more and more just kind of bland, more vanilla. Just, they've definitely become more of like an arena type band nowadays, especially now with Alyssa on the vocals. You know, they're doing, you know, these kind of big clean choruses about how, you know, we're gonna fight our fight, and you know, we're unstoppable or whatever. You know, just very kind of, you know, embracing the fact that they're kind of just like an arena, like a heavy arena rock band at this point, or arena metal, I should say. And yeah, again, love the first 4 Arch Enemy albums. I can't get into anything else they've released, and I'm not gonna bother listening to any of their new albums, because I know they're probably never gonna return to their original sound. That's fine, they can do whatever they want, obviously, but I just don't like it at all. Alright, let's talk about an old school thrash band now. Now, I think this band's first 2 albums are just absolutely killer, and they also have a super killer EP. This band is Sacred Reich, and yeah, I love their first 2 albums. Ignorance and The American Way, I think, are both just absolutely killer, awesome New York thrash albums, and the Surf Nicaragua EP is really awesome too. The title track on that album especially, whew, that is awesome. But yeah, then you know, Never Tales All This Time, thrash metal band in the 1990s. The 90s was obviously a very rough time to be a thrash metal band. Frankly, in the 90s, if you were a thrash metal band, you weren't a thrash metal band. You were playing some weird gothic, or like groove metal, alternative metal, industrial, whatever the fuck, right? And yeah, Sacred Reich unfortunately became another tragedy of that, or another casualty of that. And they put out Independent and Heal, 2 albums that I think are just pretty bad, very lackluster. Really is not anything about those albums. Like, it's just the most boring, tepid take on groove metal I think I've ever heard, really. It's like Diabolus and Musica, but even worse, those 2 albums. Boring, bland, they lose all the intensity and like the cool edge that this band had. Then they break up, and then they come back to 2019 with their album Awakening, and it was bad. I'm just gonna say it was bad. It wasn't good at all. Terrible, just really not good production. The vocals were really bad on that one. They were just so flat, and like the cadences were just off. The music was just lackluster. And they put out like they put out like a single in like 2020, and that's the only thing they've released in the past 4 years. And yeah, at this point, Sacred Reich, I don't know, maybe there's a chance that they could come back, but at this point, I still love their first 2 albums again, and the Surf Nicaragua EP is incredible. But you know, at this point, I just don't really see them making a comeback. Who knows if they're even gonna put out another album at this point. You know, like, I don't know. I thought Awakening was just a really not good album. And if they do about a new album, I don't know, maybe it's just the cynical side of me, but I fear it's gonna be like the new Evil Dead album, where it's just gonna be a very lackluster, just bad album. And so yeah, it's one band that jumped. That's the 7th band that jumped the shark for me, Sacred Reich. All right, let's just get through the last 3 on here. My number 8 choice for a band that jumped the shark for me is not a thrash metal band. It is a death metal band. That band is none other than, and it's not a melodic death metal band this time. It's just a good old-fashioned, old-school death metal band. That band is none other than Pestilence. Now, I do enjoy this band's first 3 albums quite a bit. Malus Maleficarum, I still don't know how to say that. I probably should have Googled it before I filmed this, but anyways, I do enjoy that album. It's not my favorite, but I do enjoy it. But Consuming Impulse, woo-wee, that album is a fucking ripper and a half. That album is amazing, frankly. I really, really dig that album in particular. I think it's an absolutely awesome fucking album. Excuse me. But then they put out Testimony of the Ancients. Not my favorite album by a long shot. A lot of good tracks on it, but for me, it has way too many interludes for my liking. But it's still a good album. I still do enjoy that album, Testimony of the Ancients. But that is honestly the last Pestilence album I really, really enjoy. They put out Spheres after Testimony of the Ancients, which is just not my style whatsoever. To me, I don't get into that style of like hyper progressive, like jazz fusion-y, proggy death metal, like Atheist or Cynic. I'm just not into that stuff whatsoever. I've talked about it at length on the channel about how I just do not vibe with that kind of material. And I don't know, they put out like a bunch of albums since then. I've listened to them, some of them, and it's just like, just very boring, lackluster listens each time. Yeah, yeah, really not much to say on this one. It's just, to me, they've just been putting out boring, lackluster albums. The they did a recent album of like a bunch of re-recordings of their old material, and they're just laughably bad. Terrible production, terrible vocals. So yeah, still really like this band's first 3 albums, but otherwise, I just don't care for them at all. Oh, sorry, excuse me. It is a little bit late at night as I'm filming this. Yeah, so yeah, Pestilence. That's the one of the classic death metal bands that I just really don't get into, other than their first 3 albums. And yeah, that's Pestilence. My number 9 pick. This was a band that I got into when I was younger, back when, because you know, I got into this band probably the same time I was really just getting into the classic style of metal. I was, you know, really getting into bands like Dio and Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and all that shit. And yeah, that band is none other than Wasp. Now, now, I'm not the biggest fan of glam metal, I'll be honest. There's some stuff I get into, and Wasp is one of them, but overall, glam metal is just really not my thing. But I think of all the glam metal bands, I think Wasp were definitely one of the better ones. The first two albums, yeah, I think they're still definitely glammy, you know, they're definitely rooted in the kind of sleazy hard rock sound that defined most of glam metal, but they're pretty heavy. Plenty of great songs, you know. I think Blackie Lawless was a pretty awesome vocalist at one point. Very, very metal vocalist, very powerful. Chris Holmes is a badass guitarist. So I really dig the self-titled and Last Command. Inside the Electric Circus is kinda just okay. There's some good songs on it, but overall, I think it's a bit of a step down from self-titled and Last Command. But Headless Children, God, that album is... I love that album. That album is so great. Like, I think that's easily their best album, and yeah, I really, really dig that album. Tons of killer songs. That's just, it's not even glam metal at that point. Like, they just went full bore, all balls, no brains, fucking heavy metal. And yeah, Headless Children's an absolutely killer album. But then they put out, the Crimson Idol. Yeah, that's what it's called. I couldn't remember the name for a second. Crimson Idol. A lot of people really love that album. I was surprised. Like, I was looking on the archives, and it has a 98% rating off of like 20 reviews. Like, what the fuck? That album's like acclaimed on there. But to me, I just don't dig that album really. There's a few songs on it that I think are good. It's more, again, it was supposed to be a Blackie Lawless solo album, but the label was like, hey, you can't sell this as a Blackie Lawless solo album, so they put it out as a Wasp album. Rock operas are definitely not for every band, and I think Wasp is a band that is not very good at rock operas. So yeah, I'm not a fan of Crimson Idol, really. Headless Children, to me, was the last really good Wasp album. Because then, after another time in the 90s, they put out an album called Kill, Fuck, Die, which was like a horrible, just cringeworthy industrial metal album. Then they just kind of, you know, with Chris Holmes out of the band, to me, there's really no reason to return to this band, really. They keep putting out, you know, albums. They put out, like, Neon God, Part 1, Part 2, which was another fucking, like, rock opera about, which was, like, another fucking, like, rock opera about a, like, a dude who, you know, becomes a political leader or whatever. I don't know. So yeah, Wasp, again, loved the first four, well, first three of the first four. Again, Inside the Electric Circus is kind of just alright. But, yeah, Headless Children, the Self-Titled Last Command, I think are phenomenal albums. Everything else they've released, don't care for it at all. Alright, here's the last band we're going to talk about. This is another band that I think jumps the shark for a lot of metalheads. Especially if you're into black metal, you definitely know this band. Chances are you love this band's early material, but then you don't care for anything else they've released. That band is none other than Ulver. I don't actually know how Ulver, I believe is how you say it. Yes, obviously, they started off as a staple of Norwegian black metal. Their first album, Bergtatt, is one of my favorite albums of all, one of my top 25, probably top 20 favorite albums of all time. I absolutely love Bergtatt so much. It is a pure masterpiece. That is a perfect album. Feldsanger, it's not black metal, but I still really, really like Feldsanger. I think it's an absolutely beautiful, dark, haunting, beautiful folk album. Absolutely just beautiful, and I love it. Nattens Madrigal was a return to the black metal sound, and I think Nattens Madrigal is another masterpiece. It's like, so this band's first three albums I absolutely love. I absolutely adore the first three albums. But then they put out, was it The Marriage of William Blake in Heaven? Or, I can't remember, it was a pretty long song title, something like that, which is like this weird, kind of avant-garde, industrial, metal type thing. Don't dig that album at all. But, and then they just did a total 180 into just straight up, like, electronic pop, synth pop. And apparently they're like really popular in Norway, which I can understand, because they are just like a pop band now. Again, if you're so apparently a lot of people do like later Ulver's material, who are also fans of the early black metal stuff, which is cool. And, you know, they put out, I don't know, it's really just, again, not my style. With the exception of maybe a couple artists, I really don't get into a whole lot of, like, electronic music, really, or, like, even just, like, electronic pop. Really, like, I just really don't get into, like, that synth pop type stuff, really. And, yeah, again, really adore this band's first 3 albums. Again, just top-of-the-line albums, in my opinion. Their later stuff, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's not objectively terrible. Whereas Wasp, in my opinion, just started putting out, like, or Wasp or Sacred Reich, where they just started putting out bad albums, in my opinion. Oh, they're putting out good, I'm sure, what are great albums for what they are. They're just not good. There's not good albums that I can vibe with at all. And, yeah, that about does it. So that was 10 bands that jumped the shark for me. What are some bands that jumped the shark for you guys? You know, bands where you were a fan of their discography at one point, but they just started going in a direction. You're like, nope, I am off this train. What are some bands for you guys? Let me know in the comments below. Consider liking the video, because it actually does help, you know, the algorithm and all that. Do consider subscribing, because I do have a lot more content coming your way. And that about does it. If you made it to the end of this video, hey, you're awesome, and I appreciate you. And yeah, thank you to all my subscribers. Thank you to everyone who clicked on this video. And that about does it. I am just another heavy metal maniac, and I will see you all sometime in the future. In the meantime, take care, have a great day, and bye-bye.